Deepwater Horizon Court Case by Brandy Brayman. Deepwater Horizon is owned and operated by Transocean. Transocean is leased by BP Oil Company. The oil rig was located on the seabed, 4,993 feet below the surface, and extended approximately 18,000 feet into the rock. BP Amoco British, a petrochemical corporation, became one of the world's largest oil companies through its merger with Amoco Corporation of the United States in 1998. In early 1970, BP merged its assets in the United States with those of Standard Oil Company, and BP gained controlling interest. In 1987, BP acquired the remainder of Standard Oil for $8 million and made them the largest petroleum company in the world. In 2000, the company assumed the name BP, which is located in London. Drilling for oil can be disastrous when the proper procedures are not followed, and any person, including an agent, is liable for her or his own torts and crimes. A principal can be held liable for an agent's torts and crimes, but it can depend on several factors. In some instances, a principal may be held liable not only for the torts of an agent, but also for the torts committed by an independent contractor. In April 20th of 2010, the offshore drilling rig of Deepwater Horizon exploded and collapsed, causing a rupture in the riser of a very deep oil well. An estimated 4.9 million barrels of oil were released into the Gulf of Mexico, and it was the largest marine oil spill in history. The explosion killed 11 people and injured 17. Efforts to stop the spill failed, and hundreds of gallons of oil poured into the Gulf for the next 87 days. The oil spill covered 50 miles offshore. The history as far as what went wrong, several incidents contributed towards the explosion. Cement was pumped in the borehole to seal and cap the well. Once the well is sealed, the crew could leave the rig. BP pushed to speed up the capping of the well due to being behind schedule. BP also had a prior incident in 2008 in the Captain Sea. BP failed to take the necessary steps to address adjusting the cement mixture to account for increased pressure. Prior to this incident, Deepwater Horizon did not have a single injury or accident on board that was considered enough to shut down operations. The cement mixture was not able to handle the pressure, and the test results were not interpreted correctly. The fail-safe gauges failed, and the lead was detected too late, which caused them to put a second valve in that also failed to engage. BP is the principal, and the workers are the agents. Deepwater Horizon is a third party. The principal is responsible for the agents' misinterpretations made within the scope of the agent's authority. In the court case, how the money was allocated, BP pled guilty to 14 felony counts and fined a record $4.5 billion of money, and half of that money directly benefited the Gulf. Transocean pled guilty and was requested to pay $300 million in criminal fines. The family members who lost loved ones in this tragedy received an $18.7 billion settlement. This incident fouled the coasts of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, which caused a 6-year-long environmental and legal battle against BP. It was a devastation to the ecosystem that caused the deaths of many as 105,000 seabirds, 7,600 adult and 160,000 juvenile sea turtles, and decreased 51% of the dolphins in the Louisiana Barataria Bay. This incident damaged wetlands and beaches all the way down to organisms on the sea floor. Corals were smothered in oil, and chemicals and reproductive cycles of commercial and recreational fish were disrupted, such as bluefish tuna. Over 8 million oysters were lost, and investigation continues on the public health of the coastal residents and responders who investigated and cleaned up the disaster. One incident resulted in an economic, political, scientific, and legal nightmare. The settlement ended all civil and criminal penalty claims against BP and Transocean. Under the Clean Water Act, which was established in 1948 to regulate discharges of pollutants into waters of the United States and regulating quality standards of surface water. The Oil Pollution Act was passed in 1990 by President George Bush to streamline and strengthen EPA's ability to prevent and respond to catastrophic oil spills. Congress passed the Restore Act in 2012, which dedicated 80% of all administrative and civil penalties from the responsible parties to ecological and economical recovery efforts in the Gulf. This resulted in $5.3 billion settlement to the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Trust Fund, which is also known as funding buckets. BP paid $1.86 billion to Direct Component, which is managed by the U.S. Treasury for national restoration or economic improvements efforts in all 5 Gulf states affected. BP was also issued to pay $1.6 billion to restore, protect, and revitalize the Gulf Coast according to the Council's selected Restoration Components Comprehensive Plan. BP also was required to pay $1.6 billion in spill impact component, which is the planning and implementing of approved state projects, programs, and activities. BP paid $133.3 million to the NOAA Restore Science Program, which is the research supporting the long-term sustainability of the Gulf ecosystem and the recreation, commercial, and charter fishing industry in the Gulf of Mexico. Another $1.33 million went to establishing the Centers of Excellence, which is a non-governmental organization of academic institutions of the Gulf for science and technology. Oil has become an important for fuel and lubricant before it became a replacement for wood, coal, animal power, and other energy sources. Liquid petroleum has significant advantages over energy sources and could easily transport from one place to another. As oil boomed, such as gasoline and diesel and fuel to fuel automobiles, ships, and other vehicles, a worldwide system of wells, ships, and pipelines grew. A result of old and damaged equipment, human error, and bad luck extracting oil from the ground and relocating it to other locations would occasionally release oil into the environment. The largest spills have released tens of millions of gallons of oil, resulting in fouled coastlines, polluted fisheries, dead and injured wildlife, and the loss of tourism revenue. Some of the largest disasters include the Amoco Cadiz oil spill in 1978, where a tanker ran into a shallow rock and covered 200 miles of oil off the French coast. The owners agreed to pay $120 million to the French in settlement. The Kolva River spill in 1994 was caused by a breach in a corroded pipeline in the Russian Arctic. Oil spilled the site for 8 months, spilling 84 million gallons of oil into the Kolva River. The largest and accidental oil spill of the Deepwater Horizon was in 2012, and approximately 134 million gallons of oil was released into the Gulf of Mexico. The explosion caused the deaths of 11 workers and injured 17. BP was deemed the responsible party for the disaster. Deepwater Horizon seems to be the largest oil spill in history. BP agreed to settle claims made with plaintiffs' steering committee and many individuals on the victims of the spill. BP remained liable for the sustainability additional claims by local and state entities. BP was charged with 11 counts of manslaughter for the deaths of employees upon the Deepwater Horizon. Transocean also pled guilty and held themselves accountable. Under liability of agent's negligence, the senior drilling engineer deleted text messages that were later recovered showing his involvement in the explosion and was later convicted. 2 seniors of Deepwater Horizon were charged with manslaughter. Each employee was liable for torts and crimes they committed as the agent to BP and Transocean. The incident may have happened over 20 years ago, but is still talked about today as the largest disaster in history. One of the biggest key factors to take away from any spill is that it does not just float, it sinks to the bottom, and the disaster of Deepwater Horizon brought a lot of information about chemistry and microbiology of deep and shallow ecosystems that has allowed scientists to study how carbon-containing molecules behave in the ocean. The use of chemical dispersants released for the first time in the deep ocean spill remains one of the most controversial debates in the aftermath of Deepwater Horizon. It is important that the right questions are asked and measures are taken to understand, predict, and respond to major oil spills. Here are my references. Thank you.